business is kind of the ultimate creative expression because it can be whatever you want. If you look at the best athletes, the best musicians, the best any field, they have practice. I don't want to lose somebody's $20 million. I would much rather put in my 10,000 hours.
I was scrolling on Instagram just one day and I saw a collaborative post with you and Seth Rogen.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? This is produced with honest conversations about how great work gets made and the cost of doing it right. And before we get started, we're really into the analytics and we notice a lot of you are watching but aren't subscribed. Please consider to like, subscribe so that you can actually keep up with the show. Well, welcome to the pod, Noam. It's so good to have you here. We've been friends for a long time and I feel like I've been on the other end of this, which is I've come onto your show a couple times. So this is fun that I get to do it the other way around.
Yeah. And by the way, you may have been the first interview I published. You were definitely in the top 3 that I started with. So
oh, no way.
This is
I didn't
cool.
even know that.
Yeah, we recorded back at your old studio in Hollywood when you were still there. And I remember that was like, I was just starting. I was like, I got to interview Jens as one of the first ones. So, and we may have done it more than once since then. I can't even remember. But anyways, I'm more than happy to be here.
I think I've been on yours twice now, which has been kind of fun. And you're so great at that. You're, like obviously like asking questions and learning, and so crazy. Cause like, I'm thinking about this now, like you're probably going to be like one of the first 3 here as well. So this
funny.
is kind of
full circle.
I was on, scrolling on Instagram just one day and I saw a collaborative post with you and Seth Rogen.
Yeah.
And I was like, what just happened? Can you talk about this? Did you plan this, or did you just like tag him and he like responded and he like accepted the collaboration? Like where did that come from? I'm a big fan of the studio.
Yeah.
And love like what's being done there. But yeah, I just wanted to ask about that.
No, honestly, it was kind of a surprise to me too. So I had been, I'm just a Seth Rogen fan like so many other people, and he's awesome. And I've loved his movies for a long time. And so I'd been following him on Instagram, and more recently, like I'd say in the last like year or so, I've been kind of focused, not like predominantly on social media, but a little more seriously than I had been in the past, just by looking at like what's working, what's not, what should I share more of? And I've created a couple of different like templates and formulas that seem to work for my account, at least in my audience. And one of those formulas is showing a split screen of lenses and then kind of like the final result and talking a little bit about like why that lens might have been chosen for something. And along the way doing that, Seth Rogen, I guess, had followed me because I suppose he's into that kind of thing. And I noticed he'd like engaged with other similar accounts that are sharing that sort of thing. And I had been watching the studio for a while. And I thought at one point, I was like, oh, this is a really beautifully shot, a textured film or a show that feels like it's sort of nostalgic and sort of like a throwback analog look, but not really.
Yeah.
And I really started like deconstructing it. And then I saw Seth Rogen had written something about how they shot the whole thing on one lens. So I thought, you know what?
Wild.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm just going to make a post and post it and maybe he'll like it. And then I noticed around the same time he was reposting a lot of stuff from Apple that was showing behind the scenes. So I thought I'll just tag him, and like within 30 seconds he accepted it, and it went like super viral, and like thousands of people started following my account and all that. So it's funny though, because everyone asks me that now. They're like, I saw you come up on Seth Rogen's account, but it sort of speaks to the power, I think, of the internet and what you're doing with this podcast, or like anyone that's creating content is like, on the one hand, it can be sort of a toxic environment. There's a lot of negatives, but then there's also a lot of great things that can come out of it and cool people that you intersect with, even if it's just on that level. Initially, it's a good, it's a very cool thing that can sort of come out of it.
Oh, totally. And I feel like you've been doing this, or maybe like just engaging with like social media, content creation, and community building for some time now. So I feel like you're like ahead of the curve when it comes to like some of this stuff, because it's like, oh, Noam's thinking about this in a way that like not many traditionally, like the way that you think about like filmmaking or distribution or content creation or anything like that. And it's one of the things that I appreciate about you. It sounds like you have gone on the deep dive on the studio. I haven't actually gotten a chance to talk to anybody about the studio yet, because it's like such a I don't know, magnifying glass, which it's like both funny, hilarious, and also like it hurts in
so true.
certain place.
Yeah.
Because it's so real. Sometimes like I'm watching it in bed with my wife and she doesn't like get like some of the like nuances that like I get, and I'm like laughing a little maybe too hard, or just cringing at certain places. Was that what it was for you too? Like I'd be curious, like what's been your take on the studio so far?
Yeah, exactly what you said. I think it's a great show because I think it captures just the sort of the reality of Hollywood. Like the most recent episode I saw is the one, I won't ruin it for anybody, but it's an episode where there's like an award ceremony. I think it's the Golden Globes. And
yeah,
I don't know if you saw that one yet.
Yes.
And like there's something that, for people that have seen it, they'll know what I'm talking about. But it's just one example, but there's like an actress, Zoe Kravitz, that's going to go and like do an awards speech, and like she's really she's planning to make it seem so unplanned and so off the cuff, and it's just so Hollywood, because when people from the outside watch, like they forget sometimes, like these people are actors, and the people that are greenlighting the films that are, you're reading one thing about them in the press release that's been very carefully written by their publicist, and but it's all smoke and mirrors, and really like what behind it is never, whether it's an award speech, whether it's the way movies are getting greenlit or cast, like it's all, there's so many things that like kind of are not what we would hope that would be the driving forces behind all the art that we love or the shows that we love, but I just thought it was so spot on. And like I said, just from a creative standpoint, I really like this style. Like I don't know if I've ever seen a show that quite did that, where it feels both like current but also timeless at the same time. Yes. In every
way of putting it, because the style, like if you just looked at it purely from a style, feels nostalgic, but then you realize it's current, like time, like, and it kind of, I think, like emulates that Hollywood like feel or era, but it is still modern. It is interesting to think of it that way.
Yeah. Like the locations, there'll be like a mid-century house, and then there's like the kind of 70s inspired wardrobe and adding film grain. But I think, and this was one of the other cool technical things, is they shot on the new Alexa 35, but they're using like the built-in film grain emulation, so they can actually apply live grain as they're shooting. And so it has this kind of hybrid of like old and new, which I think all of Hollywood, in a way, it's kind of like the perfect thing to do it on, because Hollywood is like so rooted in the past, and everybody loves like Marilyn Monroe and all these like stories about Steven Spielberg and all this stuff. But then it's also very much like the future, like where are things going? We want to be on the cutting edge of storytelling and reinventing how we've done things in the past. So I think stylistically, it really captured that like dichotomy, I guess, that is Hollywood. And then it presents it in this really hilarious package that is just so spot on. And I don't know, I've been really enjoying it. It's one of my like top shows probably this year.
Yeah, same. What's interesting about it too, it like, at least I feel like us as filmmakers can sometimes speak to this. Like everybody like, wants to make the best film possible, or like the greatest thing. And then you start to see like how the sausage gets made, and you're like, just even feeling fortunate enough that the thing got made.
Yeah.
Because it's like almost impossible. And there's just like, for various reasons that you can't control. Like sometimes you're just trying to like get the thing made, and like, trying to make something good. Everybody wonders like, oh, how did this thing get greenlit, or how did this thing get made? And you realize like there's all these like factors that like, I love the one episode where like he like showed up on set and like ended up like ruining like the entire like class. And there's like, obviously it's a very like caricature portrayal of it, but there's been like so many of these things that it's like you're losing light and you got to get this last shot, and like nobody realizes the constraints around like time and money when it comes to like some of these things. And it's just
in
like
the car at the end, sorry to interrupt you, but like when the car was parked there, I knew, like I forgot they set that up. People that have seen it know he like parks his car in front of this location
in the very beginning,
and it's going to come back, but by the time it comes back you totally forget, and then it's just such a good payoff. But Yeah, it's
And it's
so
so
good.
beautiful. Like that shot or like that scene in particular, or that episode, it was almost like a one take.
Yeah.
Like you start off with them in the car, and then like you go on set with them, and then you end up back in the car,
Yeah.
and you're driving away.
And I think that one literally was the oneer, because I think all of them are like each scene is a oneer, but I think that whole episode was
the whole
actually
episode was a one. I think you're right. Yeah.
yeah, I think that was the one. I'm trying to remember now because they all sort of feel like that because they'll like, they're so fluid, but most of them have some cutting in them. But yeah, that one, it was also like, if I'm remembering correctly now, it was very meta because they were trying to do a oneer in the show, and then the show was a oneer.
Exactly.
So it works on a
So
lot
meta.
of
That's
layers.
like the perfect word for that show. It's like meta on various levels, even to the, like, to your point, the look and feel,
exactly,
and the color grading and everything like that. Speaking of color grading, that's kind of how we first met. I don't know if you remember.
Of course,
like, you colored my first feature, and I don't even fully remember like how it all transpired, but that kind of led us to like working on multiple projects together, even as a director-producer relationship, too, which has been fun because we've done some stuff for Google and like other brands together. I always see you as the standard, but the unconventional, in the sense that like everybody should think of like life and freelancing and filmmaking and creating your own business and like the way that you do. But I don't think a lot of people, they get stuck in kind of like a lane or like a way. I'm just curious, like, were you always like that? Did you have like an entrepreneurial like spirit, or did that kind of like evolve in terms of like how you think about like business and creativity?
I think it was, it's a great question. I do think it was, there was always an entrepreneurial spirit, but I think, and this has been consistent across the years too, I think it was always focused not solely on growing the biggest business or making the most amount of profit, but more on allowing me to kind of design a life that I enjoy. And there's, I think in a way, business is kind of the ultimate creative expression because it can be whatever you want. It can be
Totally.
like an art gallery, or it could be a hedge fund, or it could be like, it's at the end of the day, a business is what you make of it. And you can design them in a way that kind of suits your goals and your lifestyle and your work-life balance, whatever that means for you. And,
right.
And to me, like that was the ultimate appeal of a business. And, I think, for better or for worse, I've always been very DIY. And when I think back to like when I was a kid, if I wanted, like a toy or something and my mom wouldn't buy it for me. So then I would go and like find twigs in the backyard and I would wrap them up with tape and I would like make that toy for myself. And then I would go and like make them for my friends. And then as I got older, I started to be more entrepreneurial with like filming things and selling kind of my services as like a freelancer. And it sort of always took these different forms, but it always was rooted, like even back to like making toys or whatever as a kid, it was always kind of rooted in just like wanting to have control over creating something real of value that would give me a benefit and hopefully give somebody else a benefit too. And, what that has evolved into now is like, my business model, or whatever you want to call it, like it's very unconventional. And I have, we could talk about some of the specifics if it's of any interest, but it's very unconventional. And there's a lot of people who would have taken very different like paths with kind of the, experiences or the skills that I've developed over the years. But to me, the way that I've kind of formed things now allows me to kind of place as much effort and time as I would like into creative projects, but also know that I have stability and I'm making a living and I have a family to support and I want to continue to grow that business. But it's really been designed in a way that kind of allows me to focus as much of my time on the stuff I want to be doing and not necessarily relying on anyone else to allow me to make my projects or whatever it may be. So I don't know if that fully answers the question, but that's sort of where I'd go with it.
No, yeah, it's a great starting point to where I want to double click on. Like, I think, what's interesting now is, especially because you live in LA, like the climate right now, I'm sure it's like very bleak in terms of for certain people that have worked a certain way or like, have been in the industry. And I don't know if it's fair to say, like, I don't know if that would have affected you in the same way that it would affect somebody else. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And it's like, in a way, I feel almost like bad or guilty saying this because I have a lot of friends that have left LA, especially people that are like really talented crew people that they should have been here, but it's just things got so expensive and they moved to like Atlanta to, be a gaffer there because, just the housing costs here and the jobs aren't really here anymore. And, so there's been a big like kind of movement. And I'm optimistic, on a side note that it's a lot of that will come back. But I think that, one of the things that I've been lucky with, and this is just luck. Sometimes you make a choice and it just ends up being good in hindsight. But I've always really wanted to diversify my efforts because I know if like, let's say tomorrow there's an AI plugin that actually could make everything that, do any level of color correction for free. I don't want my entire income to be based on one skill that I'm just a colorist because that may happen tomorrow. Just like I don't want all my, revenue or my time to get wrapped up in any other one thing. So that has some drawbacks because it doesn't allow you to go as in depth on certain things as a specialist might and to reap some of the rewards that come along with that. But I think the benefit to it is that when times are sort of unstable, you're very well protected. It's just like if you have investments that are diversified in different types of funds, and you have some stocks and bonds and some cash and maybe some real estate, like, when one goes up, the other might go down, but you're generally going to be okay. And so like over the last year or so, like, if I just look at my business, like I've had, the best couple of years, that I've had since I've started the business. But it hasn't been, really tethered in any way to the film industry. And there has been like some work that's dropped down. Like, for example, I've done a lot of like mid-level sort of promo videos and branded content and stuff like that for brands over the years. And I found that those jobs have like slowed down as well, even though that's not like traditional film industry stuff. They slow down a lot and the budgets have gone down and they're doing more things internally. But again, that just gives me more time to sort of put into the stuff that is working and then grow that. So it's sort of a flexible system. And right now it's working. So I'm sort of, I'm happy so far, but I'm also always cautious about making sure I maintain that kind of diversity of, effort, just so when things turn in the other direction, I don't miss any opportunities.
It's so great. I mean, I don't think a lot of creatives think that way naturally, or maybe didn't have the kind of like upbringing or like the somebody to kind of like position them in that way. Are you like, when you think of this and as much as you're willing to share around this, I've enjoyed our ability to, essentially be able to not just talk creative, but also business and kind of just all the different things. And I love that because, you're always told, or maybe in other industries, like, or just in other areas, like, oh, have 7 like levels of income streams and all of that. You don't really think of that in film, or you don't really like, nobody says that in our industry. Like they're saying, go make the film and like, maybe that becomes successful and then you can do the next one and so on. What does that look like for you right now? Like, or maybe you've had more than that before and they've come and go.
Yeah.
Do you have like a diversity of like different like ventures and revenue streams that you're currently in?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, it started to sort of build up. That might help me almost quantify it better, but it started really just with freelance work, which kind of evolved into production work, doing, like I said, branded content and stuff like that. So that always kind of was its own little business and continues to be a business, but that's less of my focus now in terms of like marketing and advertising, but still a revenue stream. Separate from that, I started like blogging and creating content, and that has kind of multiple revenue streams built in. So I have, courses on filmmaking that I've made over the years. I have this e-commerce website, Cinecolor, which is actually now the biggest part of my business, which I didn't expect when I started it. But it was very, we could talk about that later maybe, but the one thing I'll say for now is like the reason that has grown so well is because I was really able to focus on it objectively and actually look at what is giving me the maximum results for the smallest amount of my time. And then how do I focus more on that? And if that keeps growing, then I should really be putting a lot of my time into that thing. So that's kind of what's happened with Cinecolor. But I've also made these independent films. So like I've made these micro budget films, some of which were made for like almost $0 or $25,000, and some of them are features. So those are up on different platforms. And while they don't generate a tremendous amount of money, they do generate a decent like monthly kind of base, just because I have a few, there's 3 really right now that are on there just via Film Hub for anyone that is interested in doing that. And those generate a base. And once in a while, I'll get a license. Like last week, one of my films got licensed by a new app. And there was
cool.
like, a decent check that was sort of unexpected. But that's probably similar to people that get residuals for writing on TV or whatever,
Right.
where you get it, you don't know when it's coming. It's a nice kind of bonus. So there's that. I've also, moved, since this isn't really a direct revenue stream, I would say, but like in terms of just how I think about business from both a personal and a actual business perspective. Like I moved last year, and we turned our old house into a rental. So like that became technically a revenue stream. And so, there's probably others that I'm missing that are smaller ones. Like I have a YouTube thing, so I'll get some ad revenue from YouTube and whatever. But really the way that I've tied it all together is by choosing creative projects that can give me as many derivative benefits as possible. So let's say I wanted in the past to make a feature film. Most people would think of like that feature film as the sole product and the sole revenue driver for that unit of time or energy that they're putting in. But to me, I would think of it very differently. I would think like, how many different ways can I monetize this? So how can I make it as cheaply as possible, but actually turn that into the benefit? Because then that becomes an endless stream of content where I can show how I made something for $0. And then if people want to buy a course, then I can actually speak from experience and make a course about it. And while I'm making that film, I'm doing so much myself. I'm color grading it, and I'm making all these, different tools and things to finish the film. And then I can turn those into assets that are then sold on my other websites. So while it feels like there are a lot of different streams, there's the nucleus of all of them is really creativity and individual projects, namely right now film projects. And that's kind of helped me a lot, because I think for a long time I was struggling with like, I have all these different things I do, but they weren't really connected. And it felt like sometimes it was very inefficient and sometimes a waste of time, honestly, for the results I was getting. But by finding kind of like an anchor point, that's helped me to make sense of it all.
Yeah, that's so great. I love that the anchor point is film, but you found like unconventional ways to, essentially monetize them. Because I think some people will just make the short, put it on Vimeo, and that's it, or submit it to the film festival, and then it doesn't like get, the traction that they're hoping for. And then it just kind of like sits. And I knew that even for me, that was largely like my early career, was just, we would make all this like cool stuff, spend a lot of money, even like, or resource and time. And then you keep just thinking that it's the calling card, or that it's like the thing that might like lead to the next thing. But very few people are thinking about, because it's almost like in the conventional structure, it's like, it's got to be a feature or it's got to be a TV series. Then that thing will go get like, sold to this studio or this streamer, whatever it might be.
Exactly. And the irony is, if you don't mind if I add to that,
please.
A lot of times over the years, I've heard from filmmakers or people in my life, and sometimes I've even agreed with them, but they would come and say like, why are you making another micro budget film? Like, why don't you do a short and then raise money and get millions of dollars to like do a movie? And I've kind of tried versions of that. And I honestly, for me, I just didn't have the resources, or I didn't have the know-how to do that well. But what did happen was, by doing this unconventional thing, I ended up, my last film I directed last year, which is premiering actually in June. I'm not sure when this is coming out, but end of June 2025. And it's not a huge film, but it's by far like my most substantial film in terms of at least some budget, other producers involved, like some really great actors, some who are fairly notable. And it was a big step up for me. But that came from doing a movie for almost $0 with no crew. And because I did that and I documented it, I ended up getting connected with somebody who saw that to a producer that was looking to finance a movie. And now skip ahead like another year, the same producer recently, I had been in a conversation with him to direct a much larger film that would have been like by far the biggest film, is now it's being directed by, I won't say who it is or the film or anything, but it's an Oscar winner ended up being the director. So so that was to be expected, I suppose. But it was honestly, it was a really kind of positive feeling for me to even like be in the running with somebody at that caliber from doing movies for $0. So I think the irony of all of this to me is that like so many people don't want to do these small projects. And I think this even applies to business too, but strictly talking about film for a second, people see things as like too small to have value. But I think the value is really what you derive from it and how creative you are with the opportunities that you make for yourself. Because if I didn't make the $0 film, I wouldn't have been a contender to direct like a multi-million-dollar feature, based on like some really interesting, well-known people and all the rest of it that came with it. So I think everyone will have a different path, but I never think the right answer is to not do something because you think it's too small. I think something small will only lead to something bigger and hopefully more aligned with your kind of long-term goals.
The term micro budget has like, I'm sure, a very negative connotation, like that most filmmakers would like, feel like it's like kryptonite to them to be able to do. But you've taken that and found a way to make it empowering, which I thought it's what I admire about you, is because like it's the thing that's the unsexy that you've made sexy, or you've kind of taken this thing that like just wouldn't have been traditional and found ways to like profit off of it or monetize it. In that sense, like call it like the unsexy version of it, or like the negative connotation. Was that like a huge mental like hurdle to get over, or were you kind of just like, no, you know what, like I'm gonna do it, like and figure it out? Like I just gotta imagine that there's a psychological like part of it, and there's like a physical execution part of it.
Yeah,
like,
no.
Talk to me about the psychological part of that.
I know it's such a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that, but I appreciate that question. But I think I was always wired in a way where, like, to my own detriment, I didn't even see the negative. Like, I had such a blind spot with that where I only saw positive. And again, it goes back to that, like, just making stuff for yourself, being a DIY kid that would like make a skateboard or whatever. It's like, I just wanted, I would go, I remember, I used to go to like Florida sometimes and go to Disneyland or whatever, Disney World. And I'd come home and I would recreate the rides in my house. And then I would bring my friends over. And it's like, that's just always sort of been the spirit that I have. Again, it hasn't always served me, where I'm not necessarily saying other people should emulate that, but it's just sort of my nature. So with DIY filmmaking, and a lot of this is very much rooted even in music, because as a kid, I still listen to so much music, but I was really into like punk music and bands that would like create something out of nothing, that would take like three instruments, and like the singer didn't really know how to sing, but they would still figure out a way to like do this thing in a basement that became an anthem that's played in stadiums somehow. And to me, that was like the ultimate kind of David Goliath story that was like so cool. If you can do something with art that's so good that you can do it with such minimal resources and you can still compete with the $100 million projects or whatever, like that was always so exciting to me. So to me also, like growing up in Canada in like the suburbs where nobody I knew had anything to do with like the film industry. And I didn't even know you could make a living in the film industry, let alone like what the jobs were or anything. So I just always thought you just make stuff. It's like one person just makes the whole movie. Like it was just me being naive. And then as I got older, obviously you learn how things are done, but it just never made sense to me. And maybe I would think differently if somebody knocked on the door and said, hey, we have like a big agent from like this agency and they're going to get you all this money to make a movie. But like that never happened. And I don't think that really happens to anybody. So like, I don't know. And having a podcast actually myself and interviewing like hundreds of filmmakers now has really actually affirmed that to me, where I thought I might learn to go in a different direction. But there's a lot of people that have made movies that are on those higher budgets, and they actually love micro budget filmmaking now. Like one director that I had on that made like a $50,000 movie, but he'd previously made like a $20 million studio movie, and he's more excited about the small project than the big one. So Yeah, I mean,
It's
yeah.
interesting. It's almost like a grass is greener on the other side type
Yes.
of, like, I was talking to another producer recently about how like she's friends with a lot of these like studio producers and execs, and they want to make a short film and they don't know how.
Hmm.
And it's like such a mind blowing, like, because like us obviously like growing up in like low budget or like no budget like scenarios, we would never think like, oh, like you wouldn't know how to make a short if you've been in the industry for like 20, 30 years and you've been making, but all they know is how to make the sausage in the factory, or like make the film the way that they have been making it, which might have looked like just a lot of resource kind of making it. But the opposite is true for us, where like we may not even know what to do with $100 million, like sometimes,
Yep.
but we for sure know how to like make the film like end to end, or and so I just find that so fascinating because, to your point, like I think it's interesting because they might like think like, oh, it's so cool that you did it like the indie way, or the low budget way, or it's just because you don't know what you know
And it's
sometimes.
so true. And I think it's also like for me, I don't know if this kind of contextualizes it a little bit better too, but like one of the reasons I wanted to do the no budget movie that I did was because um number one, I feel like the ultimate goal as a filmmaker should not necessarily be to raise the most amount of money, although I'd love for that to happen on certain projects, but it's more about um for me, I want practice. Like if you look at the best athletes, the best musicians, the best in any field, they have practice. So how am I going to have confidence if somebody, even if somebody wanted to give me $20 million to make a movie, like 10 years ago, let's say, I honestly wouldn't have really wanted that opportunity because I would have felt like I don't want to lose somebody's $20 million and then never get an investment again. Like that would be terrifying to me. I would much rather put in my 10,000 hours in a very egoless way where like I don't care if people think it's low budget or it doesn't matter. It's like I know that every single day I get to be a director. I get to go to set, I get to work with actors, I get to write pages, get to edit my films. I'm learning every single day. They may not see the value in those projects, but when I was up like recently, I had this very long meeting, several meetings that had to do with that large feature that I was up to direct. And the only reason that they went as well as they did was because I was able to speak from personal experience to every single little film that I'd ever done. We at some point we talked about a choice that was made on this film or how I dealt with the problem on that film. And if I hadn't made those films and all I had done is raise money, the only thing I'm really proving to somebody is that I'm good at raising money, but I wouldn't have confidence myself that I actually have any sort of skill set. And I definitely didn't have the skill set then. Now I feel a lot more comfortable, but I still have that attitude where every project, like I never want to bite off more than I can chew. I just want to use it as an opportunity to do the best version of it possible, learn from it, and hopefully grow. And so I think, I guess I brought that up because of what you said before on like the studio level and the big budget level. Like when I did the no budget project, the second thing that was important to me was I'd always wanted to make a film with no crew, even though I don't know if I'd ever want to do it again, but I always wanted to know that I could do it because in a meeting with somebody, like it may not be anybody's favorite film. It may not even be of all of the films I've made. I like it a lot. It's probably not my number one film of my own that I've made. However, I always know now if I'm talking to somebody, an executive or investor or whoever, they may have expertise in an area that I have zero expertise in, but I know they couldn't go and make a movie by themselves. Like I couldn't give them a camera and say, you write a script, find actors, go shoot it, edit, do the sound design. They couldn't do that. And so it feels like a complementary relationship. And like, again, it's sort of a confidence booster for me to just know that I've done the work and I've sort of put in the time. So that's for me, that's where it came from. That's why like I was never really worried about what anyone else thought because, none of those people were really helping me achieve anything anyway. So
Right.
yeah, so that's sort of the origin of it.
Can I ask, like, how do you approach like a micro budget film? Like, obviously, things need like time and resource, right? Like anything like to get made, and there's certain things I'm sure that you could do yourself. Is most of your micro budget filmmaking thought of like right from the script level, like as you're writing it, you're thinking about it as a micro budget thing? Or is it that you're just very resourceful? Like, can you walk us through the process of like, if somebody was trying to attempt a micro budget like type of project, like
Yeah.
what do you kind of go through when you're thinking about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when I first started with it, it was a bit different. So initially, the advice everyone gives you is, pretty much the same. And it's not bad advice, but it's like keep your locations to a minimum, have like 3 characters and, mainly like daytime. So you don't do night exteriors. And like there's certain rules of thumb that you can totally follow. And that's great. And I've done films like that. But what I've realized is like sometimes to make a good micro budget film, you have to break at least 1 or 2 of those rules. Otherwise, it's so limited. And I've made things where I was like, oh, if I just broke that rule, it would have been 10 times better. And so what I've thought of like kind of more recently or in more recent years as I've developed is really what are the different models that you can apply a micro budget production to? So let's call that like model A, but model B may be totally different. Model B may be instead of shooting everything in 10 days with like a small crew and 2 locations, maybe you shoot across 25 or 30 days, but it's still affordable because it's just you and you're the DP and you have a sound person with you, or it's a 3-person crew and you're shooting on the weekends and you're spreading out the shoot so you can write in between like I did on one of my projects. So there's all of these different models. And the reason I bring that up first, because you asked about like the writing and the scripting, which 100% like it needs to be baked in like from the get-go in terms of your concept, even if it's not a traditional script and it's improvised, like there's a million ways to do it, but you have to know what your goal is from the beginning. And but I think for me, almost I like to think about the format first and then figure out like what's the best story vehicle that would work in this format. So if I want to shoot something across the course of a year on weekends, like maybe I can do a road film or whatever it is that would make sense, or something that spans a certain amount of seasons, because then I can benefit from that production value and then I will write to that. So it's kind of a combination of like traditional rules mixed with whatever format I'm choosing to explore, and then like whatever idea I think is interesting. And one thing I've learned that I wish I learned long ago was like I should focus. You don't have to think about the market from the traditional standpoint of like what's hot now, and if horror is good, I have to make a horror film. But you do have to think about the market from like there's certain qualities your film needs to have in order to be entertaining, in order for people to care, to have any financial viability. And so like just that Venn diagram of like the audience caring about it, you caring about it, and you could do it on some kind of micro budget formula, that usually creates enough kind of boundaries in a positive way, limitations around what you can do, that then you could go crazy within that like parameter. But you at least can focus your ideas in that way. So yeah,
I totally agree. I feel like sometimes you're more creative in constraints.
Yes.
Like you're having to like come up with like ideas or practices, or I mean, I think most of filmmaking is that, like, right, when you're talking about like 100 years ago when like the first films are happening, like the reason why like dolly tracks and things like that exist was the constraint of like the equipment at the time, that like, you couldn't just like hand hold a camera
exactly
to like, and so there's these creative shots and iconic like ways that we think about like film or creativity now that were all birthed out of some sort of constraint that existed.
I mean, that's the famous quote from Orson Welles is the enemy of art is the absence of limitations, because if you have like carte blanche and all the money in the world and there's no restriction, then like how could you ever choose? Because you probably have 1,000 ideas that would be great to do. So like you do need some sort of boundary, I think. So yeah, I totally agree.
And when you so let's just say like you write the script, you're starting to approach it, is most of the no budgetness of it that you're doing more of it yourself?
That's a big part of it. And another big part is, I think once you go below a certain threshold, it gets a lot simpler, because like, let's say I want to rent a location. Like I've done, guerrilla shoots in Airbnbs or in motel rooms or in all these places that I could only do because I'm one person, or I'm like me and a couple of actors, and nobody's going to care. They just think we're making a YouTube video. And even sometimes if we've been stopped, they're like, oh, it's fine. Like you're not, as long as you're not disrupting people, they don't care. So basically, that combination of having access to locations, using gear that like I either own or can get for free through rental houses or sponsored from a brand. Keeping the crew small, keeping the days short, and making sure the story aligns. Like it's all of the above. And there's always a way to do it. And I'm learning more and more actually that I'm not allowed to say who this is, but like I heard about a feature film recently, like a big feature film that was shot in under a week, the whole movie. And it's like movies on a big level are getting shot in these very, very unconventional ways. And I think that that's another thing for people who are like, not to tell everybody the micro budget path is right for them, but one of the reasons I do genuinely believe in it is because more and more of these like big shows and movies and streaming things are getting shot kind of in a micro budget way. Like they have the money for the permits and the big name actors and the full crew and whatever, so it's going to look different, but under the hood, it's actually pretty similar to micro budget filmmaking. So you're a lot more likely to get hired, in my opinion, to direct a show or a movie like that if you're a micro budget filmmaker than, let's say, if you did some like beautiful glossy Nike commercial or something, which like I used to like wish I had some of that stuff on my demo and it would be so fun to shoot, but I don't have it. And it's okay because I know filmmakers that have so much of that stuff, but like they can't really get a feature made because it's just a totally different beast.
Most people think like, I'm going to start off with music videos and then I'm going to do commercials and then I'm going to do feature films and so on, right? Like, and that's always like this end goal, like, and it's like stepping stoned. But a lot of commercial like directors have a really hard time making the transition into feature films. Do you think a lot of that has to do with like execution, or like maybe they're executing in a different way? Like what's kind of like your hunch on, or your hot take on that?
It's a really good question. Again, like I think it's two things. I think it's one is exactly that. I think there's, it's different on a big studio level where, they're shooting one page per day or whatever. So that's more like shooting a commercial. So I don't think it's going to close off every opportunity, but I do think the lower budget tier might prefer people that have like shot even like reality stuff or TV or whatever, where it's like they're working faster. They know how to be efficient because, ultimately most like producers and investors, like they're really thinking about it from the perspective of, I want this to get finished. Like I want to do the safe bet where like, I know this person's not going to be like a diva about it and the movie never gets made and I lose all my money. So they want to see somebody that's actually done it before. But I think the other part of it, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong about this, but I think the other part of the commercial thing is I think a lot of filmmakers that are like just that love film that much, they don't end up going as much into the commercial world because even though it's so much less glamorous in a lot of ways to like, kind of grind it out making a micro budget film, it's like that artist in them that kind of just outweighs the sensible voice in their head that's like, well, you could be getting like $21,000 a week through the DGA directing commercials. Why don't you should be doing that and then make your little movies later. It's like, no, I have to make these movies. I'm not even going to pursue that path that I know is more profitable and that is still risky and there's no guarantee of success there either. But if I'm going to fail, I'd rather fail doing the thing that I really want to be doing. And so I'm not like, I also know many commercial directors who are brilliant that ended up doing features and they're geniuses. And I think like David Fincher and like some of my favorite directors came out of that world. So by no means do I mean to say that's everybody, but I do think one of the reasons the batting average is just lower is because, if you go and make films, no matter how small they are, like you don't need to win Sundance to get an investment for a movie. You don't like you are making your track record as you go. And if you have made two films, even two feature films, like you've made more films than like 90% of feature filmmakers. And then if you make three or four, like they don't need to be all blockbuster hits, but you're just creating a body of work that to you strengthens your ability while somebody else is perfecting a totally different skill set, like how to make, the lighting perfect on like color matching and the hamburger glossy and all. And that's like an art unto itself, but that's a very different art than like working with actors on a dramatic scene and trying to figure out like where the emotion is coming from. And so I think it's kind of a mix of all of that.
I agree. I think it's interesting because like, there's one part of this that I feel like also the budget becomes like a crutch because like you could be a commercial director and get the $5 million spot and shoot it in like 2 days, and you just have like a bunch of resource to make this thing look good. But then it robs you and strips you of everything else,
Yeah.
which is like the storytelling aspect of it, that working with like maybe actors with dialogue, the even like what I would think like business model wise kind of maybe preps you for two different things. Like everybody's just looking for like security at the end of the day, right? Like if a studio gave you $5 million, they just want to know that like this is going to get made, this is going to get money, make money back, and then we can do it again, and so on, right? Like, and it's why track record and all of that kind of plays into a factor with it. But it almost seems like what is the blessing and also the harm with commercial directing is that like you're geared to like do that in one way, which is like very specific to advertisements, and you could almost be typecasted in the way that you can be in a movie, like to just commercials. Like, oh yeah, of course. Like if you gave me $5 million, I can make that look pretty. Or and obviously there's a lot more behind that. Not trying to like distill it just to that.
Oh, for sure.
But I think that could be the case made for why a commercial director might not even get the opportunity to just like go get the agent, go in front of the studio heads, or direct this type of features, because the track record is probably not there to show that they have been able to do something like this, versus like, what you're talking about, which is sometimes micro budget filmmaking does allow you to show that muscle, to be able to like get it out there, to maybe go to a film festival or however distribution looks like today. It could be just putting it on YouTube and it getting green lit. But you could essentially be a serial 10-year commercial producer and crushing it. And because you didn't take that leap to kind of show for the like the indie film, like, or the at whatever budget level it is, and you can get stuck there without like, if you didn't just try to attempt it. And I think most people, they feel like if they don't get, because they were so successful at the commercial world and they were getting certain budget levels and ranges and all that, if they didn't get that in moving to the feature, then it feels like they can't do it or they can't start it. It becomes a non-starter.
I think you're totally right. It feels like a step down, and it's like, and you get used to certain things and you get positive reinforcement from doing things a certain way where you like, people on a commercial level or an agency level are probably going to care about very different things than like the studio head. And again, if you put yourself in the mind of like the studio head or the investor, somebody who's financing your film, imagine you're an investor and you have $5 million to spend. Like you have two people, like regardless of what industry it is, like one person has made something, let's just say a product, in this case, a film, for $500,000 that looks like $5 million. And then the other person has taken $5 million and they've made a 30-second commercial that looks great. But that's what they've done with the same amount of money. So it's like, oh, if I give this person $5 million instead of $500,000, I'm going to get something that looks like $50 million in their head. Like that's how they might calculate it.
Yeah, right or wrong, it's just the perception
exactly.
of the current like scenario or the decision that you're making.
Exactly. That's the thing, because it's not always right. There's micro budget filmmakers that won't scale up because there's certain skills that they may not have in terms of managing teams, in terms of delegation, communication, just overall leadership, which you need to be a much better leader as your team gets bigger. And likewise, there's like commercial directors that are like the most brilliant, like potential auteurs that are going to win Sundance. And so it's not always, one or the other, but I think you're right that it probably skews a little bit more towards like commercial directors for a variety of different reasons, like having a harder time breaking in than like micro budget filmmakers. And I think that like micro budget filmmakers right now are kind of like, this is actually the time to be doing it because all of the budgets are getting smaller, and people who are a little bit more kind of jack of all tradesy, who are comfortable working on faster schedules, I think are becoming more in demand. So again, I'm not saying it's for everybody, but if you're thinking about doing it, it's definitely not a bad time to kind of jump in.
I don't know if you've seen that article recently that came out about how 71% of film budgets go over budget. It's crazy to think that this has become like a standard in the industry and you just kind of have to keep going with it. I don't know if you've heard of saturation, but saturation is the next gen budgeting tool that you can use to streamline all of your operations and your budgets and your finances on a project. It gives you really easy collaborative tools, and you're able to bring in your budgets and your actuals and your expenses all in one place. If you haven't tried it yet, go to saturation.io, sign up for a free account. It's really easy and quick to sign up. And I love what you're saying, because I think it's so true in every aspect of life. Like as technology advances, I'm sure budget resource timelines are decreasing across the board, with different advancements. In studio films, it's obviously looked one way in the past, but obviously there's been just kind of a mass chaos of different things that have kind of affected the industry in the last couple of years. What's your take on distribution and as budgets may shrink or get diversified or whatever it might be, do you kind of see the industry heading a certain way, or maybe if you were the canary in the coal mine of the stuff that you're doing that maybe not everybody else is doing yet, and what's working for you, do you feel like some of that is the future, in terms of distribution or monetization?
I can definitely answer that from the filmmaker's perspective. I think from, let's say, a producing or a business perspective, that's where it's so hard to answer, because without knowing where it's going to go, there's just I've probably talked to you about this offline, but I always say to people, I wouldn't, if it was only about the business, I would never go into film, because right. I genuinely think it is the most unpredictable. There's so many other business models and industries that are so much easier, and not to say they're easy. Everything's easy before you've done it, and recognize that. But there is just a certain kind of unpredictable. It's a strange industry in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of ups and downs and things that are out of your control. So I think from a business perspective, while I can't say how to navigate it, I think where things will go is, I think, more AVOD. I think basically we went from TV, where everything had ads when we were all kids, and then now it went into we just pay for what we want, and it's streaming with no commercials. But now it's basically AVOD again. And, whether you're a big title or a micro budget film, Warner Brothers is putting movies on YouTube with ads. So it's right. They're doing it. I know micro budget filmmakers that are afraid to put their small movies on there, but I'm let people see it and, make some money. So I definitely think AVOD, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Tubi, Shudder, those sort of platforms, I guess Shudder, maybe SVOD, but anything that's ad based, I think in the future is basically going to be more standardized. I think because of that, there will be hopefully a little bit more stability in terms of the output of content and what you can expect, and actually, again, making a living and getting jobs and stuff like that. But as far as navigating that, honestly, I don't know. I think what I do know is, as a filmmaker, the way that I think about it is how do I navigate the ups and downs and the turmoil in the industry? And one way is what we talked about, which is making things that are not tethered to Hollywood. So someone's always going to need a film grain effect or a color correction LUT. So I can always make those products and sell them, even if it's to wedding videographers or people have nothing to do with filmmaking. But I think, the other part of it that's I guess separate from that is, you can also monetize your directing skills as a paycheck to direct a job, as opposed to strictly as the back end, or as the producer. So I think as a director, I think it's more likely that I would make a large fee to direct a fairly large movie that I'm getting a director fee on, and it's going through the DGA and all of that. I think that's a more likely outcome than to sort of predict the success of any one given film, in terms of distribution, just from my perspective, because that's not my area of expertise, and the industry is like a wild west right now. So for me, that's why I'm very much focused on like make money in the ways that aren't tethered to Hollywood. And then when I make something that is a film in the future, it's like either I'm making it for nothing and I own it entirely, so it's easy to profit off of and I can do whatever I want with it, or it's a good enough budget that I could pay myself well. So even if I don't see any back end for whatever reason, because the industry is insane, at least I'm getting some front end. And I think, that's how I'm thinking about it just from a practical standpoint.
Have you seen, like, it's funny as we're talking about like the different ways of distribution and the future of distribution. Have you seen that whole recent wave of, I guess it's almost like Quibi in a new form, where it's like short form vertical videos, and apparently like it's like, it seems like it's like low quality, or like I shouldn't say low quality, low budget type of like dramas that are like and it sounded like, and I haven't watched one, so I'm probably the worst person to talk about this, but it sounds like they're like paying for like chunks of it, or like an episode here or there, and like they found a way to like, because I would have thought, you like, similar to you, like, oh, like AVOD's definitely like the future in terms of like nobody wants to pay for anything anymore, and that's just like an easy way to do it. But it almost seems like this weird resurgence of a mix of what you're saying, which is like low budget filmmaking, and also this like new like type of distribution model where like people are like paying to like unlock the next like level of the chapter of it.
Yeah. And
have you heard of that, or
yes,
have you seen it?
Okay, so it's so funny you bring that up. I was going to get to that too, because I've seen it. And last week I got an email, either last week or the week before, from Film Hub, saying that one of those platforms wanted to license one of my films. And they're like, here's how it works. They are going to chop up your movie into like these 2-minute sections. They might have to reframe it and pan and scan, and they'll add subtitles and da-da-da, they tell you. And I was like, and it was the movie I made for $0. And they don't offer like a huge fee, but it's a non-exclusive license. So you keep putting it out wherever you put it. And they're going to give you like, in the thousands of dollars for this license for a movie that was made for in the thousands of dollars. Wow. So I was like, yeah, of course. And I'm like, by the way, tell them they can have my other 2 films too. Like, I don't care. Like, that's the thing. If you're precious, like filmmakers, like this is another big theme I often come back to. And I get it, because I love Hollywood and I love like the old days of Hollywood. And I wish it kind of still operated like when I was 5 years old or 10 years old and I was like first exposed to movie making. Mm-hmm. And like, I wish that's the world we lived in, but we don't really live in that world anymore. So like, if I'm only going to do things when it's the perfect environment, when I get a theatrical release and I have all the money in the world and like Brad Pitt's the main actor, and like, otherwise I'm not going to do anything, then I'm just setting myself up for failure. So I feel like that on the distribution side too, like so many people like still won't put their movies on YouTube. But I'm like, you'll put it on Amazon and get paid less than YouTube, but you won't put it on YouTube, even though it's not that they pay you so well, but they pay you better than Amazon does. But they don't want to do it because it's an ego thing, and it makes them feel like they're not a real filmmaker. They're not like Christopher Nolan and their movies on an IMAX screen. And so I think like, sort of on a tangent about that, I guess now, but it all comes back to that idea of like, if someone offers you money, like someone offered me any amount of money to license my film, and it's a movie I made for no money, like on the weekends with a friend, I'm like, sure. And I think more filmmakers should be doing that, because if you make 1 or 2 of those a year, in 5 years, you might have 10 films, and that might be pretty decent passive income for you. So,
true. Yeah. I mean, like it almost seems like if you can put your ego aside, that there's opportunities that are there, or probably presents itself, that you don't even realize, like you're saying, like put it on YouTube, or maybe it's put it on TikTok, or like, and it's like these little clips or whatever the platform is that's renting your, because everybody's so stuck in like, it has to be in theaters, or it has to be on Netflix, or it has to be on Amazon, or whatever it is, because that's the cool thing. Yeah. And it probably does work really well for certain people, but like call it the other 95% of like filmmakers or people out there. And I don't know if you've seen this, but it feels like Vimeo is kind of making a move in that world as well, where obviously before, like Vimeo was like, you put your stuff on their platform, and there wasn't really great ways to monetize. And I think they've since like created like SVOD like ways of like being able to monetize. But now they're betting on this whole like that every creator is going to be their own like distribution or like their own like channel, like so to speak. And I don't know if you've seen this, but they're releasing like this update where like you can essentially create your own like Apple TV app, and
Yeah.
you become like a channel essentially, and you just like can create all of your content and maybe monetize off of like ad revenue and stuff like that.
I haven't seen
And
the
they're giving you the
newest.
tools for it essentially.
That's really interesting. I haven't seen the newest iteration of that, but I saw like a couple of years ago they came out with like Vimeo OTT. They called
right.
it, and then it was basically that. But I think it was kind of like an enterprise level thing. I don't think it was probably. It sounds like what you're talking about is more user friendly. Like you can build your own. It's like building a website kind of thing.
Yeah, it's almost like exactly like it's kind of like the Squarespace of like platform,
Oh,
I
that's
guess.
interesting.
Like, yeah, I thought it was like a really cool like pivot for them. And I've seen Vimeo pivot a couple times, which is so interesting because like they first started trying to compete with YouTube, and then they tried to compete with like certain like studios, like
Yeah.
creating original content, and then they went to the OTT stuff, and then now they're kind of I'm really impressed by how a big company like that can pivot in the way that they do, because you and I could pivot and nobody would like care or notice, but like,
but they deal with it, and they've had
yeah,
some, like, in my opinion, some moments where it's sort of been there have been some like setbacks where certain
Yeah.
things weren't working as well, but they've like recovered well from that. And I think it's tough. Like I think especially with like Frame.io coming in, or those sort of apps where you can get feedback and share, that could have been probably a huge like potential for them had they gotten on that earlier. But I think because they kind of missed that, then it became, it's like so much. If you think of how many, like 95% of my videos on Vimeo are just like private old links that I would send to people. So a lot
it's
of
so
that,
true.
yeah.
Isn't that crazy how that's shifted? Because before you would post it publicly and everybody would watch. I don't even know how in Vimeo to like search for public videos anymore.
Yeah, it's not that at all. And it's like YouTube is just YouTube now. It used to be, and also because a lot of it used to be that Vimeo had the higher quality playback.
Yes,
And now it's
yeah.
like everything has good playback. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I think that's really interesting. And to answer your question about like the business side, like what could filmmakers lean into that stuff? 100%. Like I think that honestly is less likely for most filmmakers than distribution just direct through like YouTube or something, only because I think to make money with any sort of subscription service, you need like really good content and you need a good library of it. So I think if you've made, like the example we were talking about before, somebody's made like 10 films and then maybe they partner with like a bunch of other filmmakers and they all put their films in a library together. Or you kind of do like what Mubi does, where they have, I don't know if they're still doing it, but when I was subscribed, it was like one movie a day comes out and then one gets retired. So there's always like 30 movies or whatever on the platform. And then you're cycling through and you're curating. But I still think like to get people to sign up, like you either need advertising dollars or you need like a big audience yourself, or you're putting a big movie on there that somebody else is advertising for you. So I think like those tools are great. I love that Vimeo is offering them, but I don't think that, I think what's going to probably happen is a lot of people will see it as this like big opportunity to make money, and they'll realize like the marketing part of it is very hard, and then they won't make as much money, and then they'll probably cancel it, if I had to guess.
Yeah, it's this unfortunate like the whole like, if you build it, they'll come mentality. It's not really true. It's like if you build it and then market it and then you like sell it and then you like, put ad dollars behind it and so on, like, then they'll come.
Exactly.
And not many people realize that until you go out and make your own film, or if you have your own kind of like content or stuff like that, you start to realize that how important marketing is, and how important that it's not just like having a distribution like mechanism there.
Exactly. It's always like so many things, like the product itself has to be amazing, and hopefully that does its own marketing, but it's not going to speak for itself. You still need to have an actual system. Like if the business doesn't have any traffic coming in, it can't, make any money no matter how good the product is. So I think a lot of those things will probably be short-term like revenue drivers for Vimeo, because they'll tap into people that are entrepreneurial and like fed up that they can't make money with their films, and maybe a handful of them will make money, but I don't think like the average person is going to have the patience to pull it off or want to pull it off, because like it would just it's possible, but I think it would take a lot more time and effort than people might expect.
It's one of the things that I admire about you, because I always like ask myself, it's like, how does Noam have like the time that he does
I
for
say that
all the
about
different
you.
things, for all the different things that you're involved with and part of, and how you're like showing up in these various, like, I was like, man, like he must be so good at time management. Like, is that true, or would that be like just kind of like, because I loved what you said earlier when we started the convo, was you're constantly finding ways for like things to be automated, or like, where you don't have to spend as much time, but the perception is you're spending a lot of time on these things, because it's not like you're selling a product and then there's just like a manufacturing company that's then just like making the product.
Exactly.
Like with anything like creative, it always feels like you still need to have a hand in it, or
Yes.
like, but maybe that's like a facade that we've all kind of just like kept believing, and maybe there are ways to automate it.
No, well, you're right. Like I am, everything's hands-on. Like for example, this week I'm rewriting a script while I'm making 2 different products that I'm going to put on my website. I'm also coming up with this email marketing strategy and doing like social content, recording podcasts. So there's a lot. However, I'm also not, honestly, I'd like to be working like full-time right now, but honestly, I'm not really even working full-time hours. And it's because I have a couple of young kids. Certain weeks it's like it's spring break, or it's a vacation, or it's summertime coming up, or one of the kids isn't in school yet. So like there's all, I've had to become a lot better at managing my time, and really more so than managing time is focusing on what I should be spending my time on. And that's been like, whether it's making films for the right reasons, or whether it's like focusing on something like Cinecolor. Like I said, when I was like looking at all my different business ventures, and I realized if I just make, let's say, one new product every week, and I market that product to my email list, and that's all I do, that will yield a greater like financial return to me than any other activity I could do the whole week, let alone in that same unit of time. So why would I not spend all of my units of time on that? And I can't really, I could do that, but then that would mean breaking apart the kind of diversification of everything that I do. But I can weight things differently now, and I can say, okay, I should spend 60% of my time on that, and maybe like 10% of my time creating content, and like 30% of my time working on a film, unless I'm actually directing the movie, and then it flips. But on a day-to-day business, like if I'm just, not shooting a movie or anything like that, then I've become a lot better at knowing what general areas to focus on, but then also what specifics within those areas. Like I used to be trying to do email marketing while I was running ads, while I was testing like affiliate partnerships, while I was doing this, while I was doing that. And they all kind of worked well. But what I realized is like the email marketing was dramatically outperforming everything else in my case. And that meant, why am I not spending all my time until something is maxed out and I hit a wall? There's no reason for me to be spending 1 second of time on anything. And then the last thing I'll say, and this is like unrelated to all of that, but like I just have zero tolerance for unnecessary meetings. Like I could talk to you or like a friend, like this all day. I'm gonna learn something. Like I wish I was asking you more questions in this interview, but like I always like enjoy something from these conversations. But like I don't want to be on a Zoom meeting with 6 different people talking about something that like nobody has an answer about, and wasting my time. So like
I don't know if you feel this, but like post COVID, it feels like people have had this like insatiable desire to like I guess I don't know if it's to find connection in other ways or whatever, but like I find myself like almost like from the start of my day to the end of my day, like mostly on Zoom calls. And it almost feels like you're, to your point, like unnecessary. Like I didn't do this as a way to compensate for in-person prior, like meaning like, pre-COVID, I wasn't seeing these people like in person all the time, yet something like alerted people that like, oh, we need to be like on video more, like talking more, or whatever it might be. And it feels like, oh, like something that could have been handled in a text or like a quick phone call or whatever it is,
exactly
has turned into these like preset, like 30-minute, 60-minute slot type of, I don't know if it's just I'm growing up and
no,
like this
no,
is
no,
like
no.
something has fundamentally changed, but it's like I feel like my whole day is just like calls, like, or video calls now.
I think you're totally right. Like I've seen that shift as well. It's like even recently I had some people I'm working with say, okay, let's talk about something for 15 minutes tomorrow. Do you guys want to do a call or Zoom? And I was like, please just do a call, because like I just
Yeah,
want to go for a walk around the block and put in my headphones and like
exactly.
whatever, have an iced tea or something. But everybody else is like, oh, let's do Zoom. Like if you need to have, camera off, turn camera off. And I'm like, that's totally fine. I didn't realize though I was the odd one out. I thought people genuinely like hated Zoom. Like I don't like I look at a computer screen enough as it is. So it's like
Right.
if I can walk around the block or be in nature, sit in my backyard, and like I'd much rather go and do that. So
That's so underrated because like I'm a pacer when I like was on the phone or like when I would talk, and it feels like why I was able to have like some level of like exercise was
yes.
because I would just do like walk and talks or like calls and like walk around.
Yeah.
And now you're just like stuck to this like computer screen, and you're like, it just seems like that's just most of my days now. Like it's just like so crazy that's become that culturally.
I didn't even
Or
think
I
about
didn't know
that.
if it was just me.
No. I think you're totally right, and I do think the pacing thing is 100% correct, because creativity. It's like there's scientific studies on all of your brain, using a part of your brain when you're taking a shower, driving the car, going for a walk. Like a certain part of your brain is occupied to free up the creativity in a different part of your brain, and not redirect energy somewhere that it doesn't need to be going. So I think that it's like why Steve Jobs used to go on the, like, famously, like, get his best ideas like going on walks. Like
Yeah.
you can't really simulate that looking at a slightly delayed picture of somebody on a screen that you've been staring at for hours. So it's a good tool to have, but it also goes to that, like, I don't know if you ever read that book, Deep Work, by Cal Newport. I've never even read the book, but I get the premise of it. So
Sure.
that I know that I agree with it.
Notes.
Exactly. And I want to read the book, but ironically, I'm usually trying to prioritize my own deep work so much that I'm not even having the time for that kind of stuff, like to read as much as I want to be reading.
Yeah.
But anyways, the idea is that like you can get so much done in a very short amount of time if you're actually focused. If like there's no notifications, if you're not talking to someone on Zoom, if like you're in the right creative flow and you have like 2 or 3 hour block to just push through your work without somebody bugging you, the amount that can get done in that time frame is insane, and the level of quality that you can get from yourself is so much better than if you split up that 2 hours among like 30-minute chunks in between other meetings and while you have like a phone in the background buzzing. So I think that, like, to me, the second somebody, even if it's like someone I'm working with that I really like, if they start wasting time on like telling me about something that I don't have time for, I'll just politely tell them like, I have to go, because I need the deep work. I need the time for that. Otherwise, when I don't have that, everything that I do pretty much like falls apart. So that's
so true, because sometimes you're like slot filling. So like you feel like you have to like talk for like 30 minutes or whatever it might be. Like you're just like, and it's like all the like, and it's like, yeah, there's a time and place where like I do want to like know more about like what's going on in your world and all that. And like, but then sometimes it's like, oh, for this very specific thing, like it really was just like, a quick kind of like interaction. And focus is such a lost art, especially when you're like told to like be multidisciplined, and like that multitasking is like, like a good thing and all that. Like the idea of like focus just is, and it's very hard, like with distractions that kind of like come in our world today. But it's so true. And I've always wondered, like, especially because you have kids, and I always find it like I always think like I'd never have enough time for anything. But then I see like people with kids, and it's like, it's so crazy to me that like they're doing what I'm doing plus maybe more than what I'm doing. And they have like, these other types of things. And it really, every single one of them like says like, oh, it just helps you focus more. Like you're not like some of the things that you don't even realize, like you're wasting time on, like it just kind of go away when you have to like, okay, you only have like between 10 and 5 to do everything. Cause like once the kids come back home, or, once they wake up, it's like, you don't have that time anymore.
I may have even shared this with you offline, but I had the exact same experience. Like I thought it was going to be the end of like any time that I had. And it, while it certainly, takes a lot of time. First of all, the time is great and it energizes you because you're like looking at this thing that kind of looks like you and it's like talking to you and doing like making you laugh. It's like, so it's like a positive, it's not like you're putting that time into like something negative. So you
Right.
having a positive experience that recharges you when you go back in a way. It's also draining. And, at the beginning, you don't get sleep and all this stuff everybody tells you, but like, it's not just negative. There's a lot of, positive. And I think, and then it really does help you focus. Cause like if somebody asked me before kids, like to volunteer to like help them on a project, I might just easily say yes. Cause I want to be generous. I want to help people. But now it's a lot easier for me to say no because it's like, no, I can't like take food off of my kid's table or like not go to their baseball game so I can like color your short film for free or something. So
Right.
it makes it a lot easier to say no and to focus on the things or like, it's like maybe, I'll send a sales email through my website. And in the past, I might have thought like, I don't know, did I send in like too many emails this week? It's like, who cares? Like it's a business, send another email. And like those sort of decisions that I would sit with and like waste time on, it's just like, there's no time for that. It's almost like, from like directing or producing stuff. It's like the mindset you get in when you're on set. I think when it's like, you just have to be sharp enough to know exactly what the right decision is without wasting time, know what to put your time into. But if you could do that, I think you could like be more successful as
So
a result.
true.
So
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting as we are quoting Steve Jobs throughout this whole thing, but his whole definition of focus is the ability to say no. It actually has nothing to do with time. It's kind of the power in saying no to things.
I didn't know that was what he said, but it 100% makes sense.
Yeah. It's so profound. What what does it look like for you right now? Like, what are you currently working on? Like, are you like embarking on any like new film projects or creative endeavors?
Yeah. So a few things. So I finished, like I said, I did this movie last year called Teacher's Pet, which is going to come out it's going to premiere in June and probably come out, later in the year. But that's been getting into a bunch of festivals. So we're going to have like a whole festival run from like June until probably September, October. There's already, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5, I think that we've gotten into. And it's really exciting, that project, but it's sort of nice because I've been working on it for like 2 years, writing and shooting it and editing it. So now it's like I have a lot of time back because it's done. So I have another feature that I wrote. I was waiting to see if I was going to direct this like much, much larger feature. And now that I'm not, I'm going to be developing this other film, which hopefully I'll be able to shoot toward the end of the year. And it's going to be, it's going to require like some investment, but I have some resources for that. So I'm excited to sort of like, take it up another notch in terms of just scope and try something new a little bit with this film. And then just on the business side, like I'm really focused on like kind of the, the Pareto's principle or the 80-20. That's another thing I always think about as like, what's the 20% of my time or effort that's going to yield 80% of the results. And so for me, it's like, those things have really come down to filmmaking, podcasting, and we could talk about that because obviously it's amazing that you have a show too, and I think like there's so many benefits to doing that, but that and then Cinecolor, my post production site, and to a lesser extent a little bit of social media because that's helped sort of glue a lot of the different things together. So those are kind of always my core areas of focus. But they're, they ebb and flow, I guess, week to week.
Yeah. I know. And I hear that. I what I do really like love is like you're saying, like you're speaking into things that maybe people think about, but don't really do, like, especially filmmakers. I feel like we don't really think about like email lists or podcast or anything like that. There's as I've been going through this journey, I feel like I'm late to the game of like starting a podcast because it's like, oh, everybody has one. And like, there's nothing new under the sun to like talk about. What I loved about, you said something earlier about like even emails, like being like a focus for you. And I would have thought like, I hate like when people email me and like, but these forms of like content creation, do you feel like there's still opportunities for like new people to get into like, whether it be like creating the newsletter, creating the email blasts, the podcast, like
Yeah.
what's kind of like your take on like the future of that? Like, is that still worth investing in and or like starting today?
Yeah, 100% it's worth it. I think depending on, I think part of it, if it's worth it, is just objectively like, yes, there's opportunity, period. I think whether or not it's worth it also comes down to if it's something you're going to enjoy doing, that, you know, you have some like you're like perfect to have on a podcast because like you're very smart, you have a lot of success, you speak well, and you ask great questions. So it's like everybody's going to want to, I'm sure, listen to this. Not me, but your other guests, but just because you're making it a great environment. But some people might like the idea of doing a podcast, but like they don't really feel as comfortable in conversation, and they might be better exploring like a written newsletter or some other format. So I think it's like there's opportunity in every possible area. I think where people go wrong sometimes is thinking that they need to do everything, which is where I've went wrong, and realize like, you know, like right now, I almost like for a while I was growing on Twitter really quickly. And then I've sort of would have to write things in a way that I don't want to write them in to grow on there right now. So I'm more focused on Instagram, and Instagram is growing like very quickly because of that. At the same time, I'm not like, that's not my main focus. If I wanted to put 100% of my time into that, it would grow a lot faster. But anyway, I think like for like emails and things like that, there's the biggest thing I learned from that experience. I'm not talking, by the way, about like a paid newsletter. I'm talking about just e-commerce marketing, basically saying, hey, we have a new product, click here and check it out, or we're running a sale today. And I had this like extremely self-limiting belief that I didn't know I had for so long, where I was like, I can only send like one email a week because people will just hate me if I send more than one. And then I started looking at my inbox, and I was like, well, you know what? Like Zillow emails me basically every day telling me about a property or this or that. I get an email from like this clothing brand that I love like 3 times a week. And I was like, I don't get that upset. Some people I'm sure hate it and they just unsubscribe, but like I actually like them as a brand. I want to know about their new products. So I'm not going to open every email, but I'm definitely I'm not going to hate them either. So I started sending more than one email a week, and then I wasn't getting any negative like pushback. And so I scaled it up to the point where I was comfortable. And then I also realized I could segment my email list. So I didn't have to email everybody 3 times a week. I could email some people 3 times a week, but some people once, and some people a different offer on a different day or whatever. And that's what big companies do. Like if you think of like Walmart or any of these like huge companies that are probably sending emails 24/7, like they're sending like 50 different email campaigns a day, all going to different people, like sign up for the credit card, like buy this thing on sale. So it was like this false belief that I realized like I didn't know anything about email marketing. I thought I did. And I thought I could like send one email and like, that's all I was supposed to do. But I realized there was this whole other layer to it. And as soon as I like took that false belief away that like I had to only send one email, then that's when the business like totally got unlocked. And I felt like so stupid for not seeing that earlier because it was right in front of me. But it's one of those things, like, again, you can only see when it's like your goal is to look at things through the prism of what is the one most important thing right now, and like how do I refine that. And that's sort of how I came to that conclusion.
It's so good because I'm with you. As I'm starting this now, it feels like I'm late to the game and I have to do everything, right? Like I have to start the podcast, create the newsletter, have the ads and like the Instagram following and all of that stuff. And you can easily just start to get spread really thin and get demotivated by a lot of it. And it felt like for me, at least, I enjoy just having conversations with people. So podcast felt very natural to me.
Yeah.
But you're an incredible writer and you're a great speaker too. So like the fact that like you do kind of skirt both makes a lot of sense, because like I don't think, naturally speaking, like I would have loved to create the like newsletter right away. Not to say that I shouldn't at some point, but at least to start with, it felt like what was important was to get consistent about something.
Exactly.
And that felt like was going to be the bigger unlock. Like if you could do it more than the once or twice, in a blue moon, and also like that people are expecting it at some sort of regular cadence.
Yes.
That people are looking forward to it, or, it actually can build some level of success to it.
I totally agree. And I think that's smart. It's like, and honestly, on the writing front, like you're at the right place at the right time, in my opinion, because I've seen, while my podcast has grown, my blog traffic, I have a written blog, and that's kind of like plateaued over time because, and I think I'm anticipating that's going to go way down because of, ChatGPT. People are getting their information in different ways. So just a standalone blog post isn't what it used to be. But I think if you look at the competition for, let's say, a new podcast, it may feel like you're late to the game, but I don't think you are at all. Because if you look at like, what's the competition for like something in your like topic on like, let's say filmmaking blogs, there might be, let's say there's 10,000 different filmmaking websites, or however many, like thousands of them in different ways, shapes, and forms. There might only be like, 500 on filmmaking podcasts. So like it feels saturated, but it's actually nowhere near the level of a lot of other, specifically like blogging or other forms of content. So I think you're at a good time for it. And yeah, I think like the other thing that kind of unlocked this for me was like seeing people that I knew who were other like kind of content creators that had done the simplest things and made a fortune doing them, and had so many happy customers and fans who basically one person I'm thinking of who had like a really effective Twitter following, and that was monetized by a course that he sold. But all he had was like Twitter, maybe a course on Gumroad, and that was it. And then later he added a newsletter. But it was like just from writing good tweets and having a little course he made in his basement and put up for like $100, like he was making like millions of dollars a month. And so when I would see things like that, it just made me realize like I don't need to overcomplicate everything. And if somebody can have a whole multi-million-dollar business from a Twitter account and a Gumroad, one product, then like I shouldn't be spreading myself so thin unless I have like the resources to hire people to help me. So yeah, all of that was kind of big for me, I guess, when I was trying to figure out what to do. And by the way, I'm still figuring it out. Like sometimes when I hear people on podcasts, like it always sounds like they've got it all sorted out. Like I have, I'm sharing kind of all the lessons I've learned, but there's so many questions still ahead of me, and days where it's like challenging, or if I've not got any of this right. But on my best day, this is sort of, I guess, a bit of a picture.
I think that's the real power. I think we all kind of convince ourselves that the person talking is the thought leader or is the most like experienced person. But it feels like what I've been seeing, at least in this like newer generation, is that like it's the like kept information. Like it's like how are you being like honest about something, for good or for bad, or maybe you just know like one step ahead of like the person that's listening, and they're in a similar way that you might have read that book from the expert.
Yeah.
And that's how it used to be. Like you to write the book, you were the expert on this particular like domain or whatever. But it feels like what's cool about, because the information cycle's so quick these days, like everybody's just kind of putting it out there in real time and just being what feels like honest about like certain situations. And I think that's what kind of gains the like trust or the following to some degree.
You have to be honest, and that's one thing I've always tried to do. And sometimes, like again, that's one of the hard things if you're putting yourself out there and you're honest. Is like sometimes the honest thing isn't what people want to hear. Like I've told people when I've made a film and I've said like, look, this film didn't make money or didn't do this until I did this or that, and then someone might criticize like, oh well, you made a film that wasn't profitable right away. And another filmmaker might have a film that actually made less money, but they will like kind of set it up in a way and do their own PR to make it feel like the movie was profitable. And someone might say like, okay, that person made more money with their movie. I'd rather tell people the truth. Like I'm just a guinea pig. I'm going out there doing these weird things, like making movies with no crew, and sometimes making things like I love, sometimes making things I don't love as much. And I'm just reporting back as to like this worked, this didn't. And sometimes it's like not what people want to hear, but I think it more often than not, I think it does more good than harm, because I think, I've the thing that keeps me going, especially with like a podcast, and I'm sure you definitely will experience this, like given the level that you're doing it at, but you're going to have lots of people that email you and say like, hey, I was going to quit and I heard this episode and I made a movie and now it got into this film festival. And it's like, when I hear stuff like that, it makes me want to, keep doing it. So I think you just, it's not all easy, but you just have to focus on the positive and, do it for those reasons and, and learn as you go.
Oh, it's incredible. It's one of the most meaningful things when something that you do can spark something in somebody else, or maybe like help them. I've been a part of a couple films that have been able to do that. And I'm excited to hear that it is doing that for you in terms of like some of the outlets that you're talking about.
Yeah, I know you've had like huge, I remember certain films, like just huge responses too. And that's the thing. It's like, that's why you should be doing it, not because you need anyone thanking you, but because like, that is like, as lame and cheesy as it sounds, like that is actually the ultimate reward. Because when you get to the thing that you think is the reward, like you get in the festival or somebody invests in your film or whatever, it's like, it never feels the way you think it will. But like that does, like when somebody says like, you did something that positively impacted me and you didn't even realize it, like that's the only thing you can kind of like hope for, really. And everything else is what it is.
You may think to have impact or purpose that it has to be something direct, but what's the beauty of like our kind of like format and medium is that largely it might be indirect, because you're putting something out in the world and they may find it in a season or a time that you weren't like expecting, or maybe you don't even know the person.
Exactly.
As much as we've talked about like money and commerce and all that stuff, which is like I just love talking about it for it. It's like a numbers game. Like I just love the idea of like how you can be creative in that, but largely like the purpose that you kind of leave behind and that you're able to like, to affect other people's lives is such a crazy thing to think about, that like, essentially that's what art is doing. And we get the opportunity to do it in these different ways.
Yeah.
And you just never know how that might manifest.
No, you're so right. And I've had that myself where I've listened to podcasts and there might be something that like was not even meant to be a focal point of the conversation. Someone just like threw out in passing. They probably neither of the parties thought at the time, like this is going to be something people are going to talk about, but it like resonated on some level where I was like, oh, I got to rewind that, listen to that one sentence again. So like, there's things that like, we're trying to express ourselves in a certain way and be as helpful as we can, but like, it's also the subtext of what people are hearing that we're not even realizing we're communicating. So like, that's why I think overall, if you're putting yourself out there, podcasting, writing, doing whatever, like, again, it's not for everybody, but I do think it does more good than not if you're trying to be some sort of positive force. I think people get a lot from it. I think you can get a lot from it. And yeah, it's like more brands should be doing, I think, what you're doing. And I think more people should be the face. Like, I think people really trust brands like for saturation. I think knowing you as the voice of it and knowing your background, your expertise, like that only makes somebody, I think, want to use the platform more. And that's how I feel with any brand where I know who the founder is. So I think it's a shame that like more of the legacy big brands don't do more of this kind of stuff, or if they do, it's like some produced show with someone that's not even really affiliated with the company. So
it's so true. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because like I never in a million years thought I'd be in front of a camera. Like I strategically chose behind the camera and producing for many reasons. And it is getting out of my comfort zone. In a lot of ways, because I just don't naturally think of this, but I do enjoy it and appreciate it because it is allowing me to connect with people that I wouldn't have thought of, even like in building saturation. Like now that it's connected to me as the founder, it feels like there's a direct relationship I'm having with other producers that I never would have had before.
Exactly.
Because it's so funny because you don't ever think of it this way, but when you're the producer on set, you're not necessarily meeting a lot of other producers.
Yeah, that's true.
Or if you're the director on set, you're not necessarily meeting a lot of directors on set.
You're right. You're kind of working in isolation.
It is, yeah. And so this has been what's really fun is as I've now been trying to get out there and connect in the various forms or mediums, it's allowed me to meet people that I would have never met before. And, we're kind of bonded by this passion for this part of the industry. But then, just generally speaking, like, I think it's connecting in a way that I wouldn't have naturally thought. So
yeah, that's amazing. You recognize that though early, because that's, to me, the biggest benefit of podcasting. And a lot of people don't stick with it because they're like, well, if I can't monetize it immediately, or it's not getting ad money from Casper mattresses or whatever, like everybody else, then I'm going to just quit. But it's like, really, that's the value. Like, so many of the people that I work with to this day, probably, as you will find with your podcast, are like you deepen these connections through these interviews. And also another interesting thing, and like going back to what we were talking about before, just like efficiency and how you would spend your time. Like, think of like taking an hour and a half to do a podcast interview with like a producer versus being on like a Zoom meeting where like you're one of 5 people with that producer and nobody really talks or cares. Like, this is memorable. It's something that both of you can like share. You can look back on it. Like, it does really create that interesting dynamic. And you're going to be spending that time potentially talking to somebody anyway. Why not record it, benefit both of you, and share it with people? And it's like, I don't know. I think there's so many reasons to do a podcast, but you also do need the right formula. And I think you're speaking to something here that a lot of people don't think about, because so many creative people feel like it's the antithesis of like creativity to be business minded. And other business people say like they're not creative at all, but actually they're extremely creative. They're just not realizing, they're just not applying it to film or whatever other art form. And I think when you can kind of understand that we can all be both, and we're best sort of when we leverage both sides of the brain in a way. I think that that's great. And I think that's, to me, that's kind of the ethos in a way of your podcast.
That feels like ultimately where we should end, because that kind of captures everything that I've ever hoped or wanted for.
Okay, let's end on a high note. Okay.
So end on a high note. That was amazing. Noam, I'm so grateful that you were on this, and I hope we get to do it again sometime.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to Produced With. You can find more episodes wherever you listen to podcasts. Produced With is brought to you by Saturation. If you're a filmmaker, check out saturation.io, the all-in-one production budgeting, payments, and actualization tool. If you like this episode, subscribe to the show, leave us a review, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. Special thanks to our producer Eugene Wade and editor Stephen Gray for helping shape the conversation and making it sound as good as it does. And hey, check out the show notes. Join the community and find us online.